We're good to go.
All righty. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Meladie Lowe. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As previously stated, we are going to talk about how to make recruitment and hiring processes inclusive and equitable. Want to go over the agenda really quickly. I will do my introduction. We'll go over the background of everything, what the scope of work was, including who partnered with me, impact, and then questions towards the end. For those of you who have never met me or know little about me, my name is Meladie Lowe. I am a social worker who has over 12 years of experience within government, nonprofit, private sector, and community organizations. I'm very passionate about meeting people where they are in life and creating environments where people thrive. They report feeling seen, heard, and valued. Within the work that I have been doing as the Equity Implementation Program Manager for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment within the Prevention Services Division, I had an opportunity to work with several teams as well as our staff to make sure that we revamped our hiring process and recruitment process to allow us to have a workforce that is more diverse and rich of the experiences of the community that we serve. I have a question for you all. Feel free to take yourself off of mute or to answer in the chat. When you think about recruitment and hiring, what's one barrier you've seen or experienced, whether as an applicant, a colleague, or a hiring manager?
Not having the right clothing. They always say dress for the job you want, but what if you don't have the money to do it?
Okay, I can appreciate that. Thank you. The sheer number of applications received. Very true. Hunter, I applied for a job a few months ago and I received an email saying, "Thank you so much for applying. We want to let you know we had 2,500 people apply for this position." And that blew me away. So, yes, there sometimes are a lot of applications out there. Anyone else? Making the pay or salary a guessing game? Adam, I can totally relate to that. I on LinkedIn all the time, and it always tickles me when I see people post jobs, but they don't post the salary or the pay. And it's like, so I have to search for that. You can't just be transparent and putting that out there. I think within some states it is illegal, but I see a lot of remote jobs in different agencies, depending on where the hub is, still doing that. Lack of clarity in posted job descriptions. Allison, just out of just to clarify, are you saying like the job description will say one thing and you get into the job and it's a different experience, or you're looking at the job description and it's not detailed? Both. Okay, thank you. Lack of follow-up from hiring committees, receiving rejections 2 years. Stephanie, 2 years. Wow, that's a horrible experience. All righty. Yes, all of those and then some, right? So this is what we know in regards to uh, recruitment and hiring. Equitable hiring is essential for establishing trust and enhancing public health outcomes. Uh, Challenges include very long processes to one of the points that you talked about, rigid merit systems, inconsistent practices, and implicit bias. You mentioned not knowing what to wear. And I think depending on where you work, that could be tricky. And depending on who the hiring manager is, that could even be tricky. I watched a video on TikTok a couple days ago, and there's an individual who does really short videos, and she was saying, "Don't ever wear black to an interview. This isn't a funeral; it's an interview. Show up in blue or nice bright colors." I was raised, you do black or blue or gray, and so I was like, "Oh, that's different." Okay, I think it really does change depending on who you're talking to. The solution includes inclusive recruitment and outreach, standardized and equitable selection processes, manager support, and accountability. So I'm going to pretty much go over the work that I did within my division, the Prevention Services Division within CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Essentially, we did a huge comprehensive redesign to our recruitment and hiring process after hearing from not only our internal staff, which included our hiring managers, but also what the community was saying in regards to our process, especially with us being a state organization or agency. A majority of our work was rooted in what we refer to as IDEA, so inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, to really make sure that we would have a recruitment and hiring experience that decreased trauma for people, decreased stress for people, as well as gave them an opportunity to feel like they were supported through the process. One thing I forgot to mention in my introduction is I am a trauma-informed social work professor at one of the universities in Denver. And so it was very important for me, as well as just being a social work, to try to have a trauma-informed way of doing things. So a little bit about the Prevention Services Division. We're a state government organization. At any given time, we can have between 200 and 230 staff members. Our work focuses on, bless you, Robin, preventative health. So looking at chronic disease, nutrition, violence, oral health access. Are you brushing your teeth? Are you flossing? Are you using mouthwash? Different things of that nature. Our desired outcomes when revamping and really assessing the overall recruitment and hiring process was to increase our hiring managers and staff confidence, but also give them tools that they could actually use. When I started meeting with a lot of our staff, I realized that each hiring manager hired their own way instead of there being a seamless way that would promote a cohesive experience for those who were interviewing with our agency. And so it was very important for staff, one, to feel confident doing it, because for a lot of our positions, we hire on a very short or limited basis. You might have an opening once every 5 to 10 years. For some other positions, it might be a little more frequent. In regards to the second one, hiring managers wanted to find a way to engage in the recruitment process and hiring process. Within some dynamics within our agency, some hiring managers felt that they were sometimes excluded or they were limited in who they could partner with when recruiting and hiring people. And then our third desired outcome was to increase diverse representation for our staff across the board. At the time where we started assessing our organization, a majority of our staff identified as white women, which is very common in the public health world. And so we really wanted to make sure that we could increase that overall diversity so that we are meeting the needs of not only our staff from marginalized identities, but also the people that we serve across the state of Colorado. Wanted to spend some time defining diversity a little bit more for each and every one of you. Oftentimes when people think of diversity, sometimes they think that you may only be talking about race. That is not accurate. For us, it was important for us to have people from diverse gender expressions, sexual orientations, culture, age, ability. Identifying as a neurodivergent person myself, it was important for me to also be very thoughtful and trauma informed on how we could improve the recruitment and hiring process for them. Also looking at different classes, personalities, and so forth, just to let you know. My collaborative partners when doing this work were the CDPHE Human Resource Office, as well as the personal liaison within my division, who essentially is the primary support for our division director, as well as some of our leaders at our senior leadership level. And I also created a strategic workforce, which included 7 internal employees from different branches and offices and units within the division. It was important for me to have diverse representation because within my own identity and intersectionalities, there's no way I would be mindful of every, and I mean, like, we still weren't mindful of every single person's experience, but we wanted to have a team dynamic where people could really be reflected and we would have an opportunity to have a richer and more robust conversation in regards to what's missing within the current recruitment process. So some key trauma-informed and equity-driven innovations that I want to go over that really supported our work in doing all of this was first starting with assessment and data collection. So across every single level within our division, we took the time to realize who was missing, who was already there, what were people reporting as positive or negative experiences. And we really wanted to make sure that we were not only addressing everyone's concerns or their barriers in looking at this process, but how can we improve it overall so that this could be a systemic change that will last long after we implement this process. In addition to that, we looked at how can we be trauma informed through this interview process. I previously mentioned I'm neurodivergent. So for me, and especially growing up in a home where I had a single parent who was working about 3 jobs at any given time, I thought, how wonderful would it be if we think of people from different classes, different social economic groups, those that are neurodivergent, or other different stress factors, and we give our interview questions out in advance. So we give our interview questions out 24 hours in advance. The only time it is not 24 hours in advance is if your interview is on a Monday. Then you get your interview questions on Friday because it goes based on the work hours and days. What we have seen in being more trauma informed with our approach is a huge reduce of stress for the people we're interviewing, as well as really fostering an equitable preparation opportunity so they can show up their best self throughout the process. It was important for us to also have equitable tools and templates. This is also looking at being trauma informed. I don't know about you, but sometimes on any given day, you can have a lot of different tasks that need to be completed, or your day can shift and flexibility is really needed. With that, capacity can look very different for different hiring managers. And so it was important for us to make sure that we created templates and guides. And one of the guides that we created was an implicit bias training and guide to address, hey, Susan, hypothetically, I know that you think people should come to interviews in suits, but what does everyone else think? Oh, you know what? I'm fine if they come wearing a sweater or whatnot. Now, that's not an actual example of how we looked at bias. It was more through the lens of do we have a bias in how people answer questions, or if they are maintaining eye contact. And then with that, I would provide additional training on how we can get around that, especially trying to be mindful of individuals that are neurodivergent and how they may show up within interviews. In addition to that, we wanted to promote transparent and inclusive communication. And so within the email templates we created, where a hiring manager would send it to someone who has applied for a position and is going to meet with us for an interview, we would make sure that we would include every single panel member's name, title, and pronouns. We would also encourage them to look us up on different platforms like LinkedIn or Google us so that you can get a little bit more information on us and really try to highlight that through a transparent lens. We would also share any contact information, encouraging a bi-directional relationship where they can reach out if they have any questions or concerns leading up to the interview itself, as well as any expectations. One of the things that was really important for us was to make sure that we were using inclusive language. Oftentimes, when you are in a government space, and I see it in academia as well, we have a lot of acronyms. We have so many acronyms. And so trying to make sure that we are avoiding any of that as well as promoting different terms that aren't gender coded, or make it seem like you have to show up in a very masculine way or a feminine way in order to have the job. This type of transparency really supported the overall process, not only for us, but also for the people we interviewed with. And it helped us as a team and as a unit build trust also among our teams and really start to see ourselves as people and individuals, not objects and tools, just trying to get to the end of a process. The next ones were cultural alignment during interviews. And so really looking at how can we demonstrate our culture, who we are through the interview process. One of my biggest pet peeves when I have interviewed for jobs or have been on an interview panel has been when someone is asked a question, the interviewee is asked a question, they don't answer the question the way the hiring manager would like, and they move on instead of asking for clarification or giving that person another opportunity to answer the question. And so with us, we pushed really hard to make sure we were not giving people tests they didn't know they were taking. And we weren't creating a dynamic, power dynamic, cultural dynamic where people weren't aware that, hey, appreciate that answer. And this is kind of what we are more so looking at. Do you have anything to say in this regard? In addition to that, at the beginning of every single interview, whether it's interview number 1 or interview number 2 or 3, depending on the level positionality within the organization, we would also go over the salary range. This is what we know for a fact we would be able to offer. Is this okay with you? If we ever had, and we did have some experiences where people were like, well, we were really hoping, to make a little bit more. Is this negotiable? We would have those conversations on the front end because we value your time. We value who you are. And your bills have to get paid. You have priorities and stuff in your own life. And so, from a very transparent lens, we want to be respectful to you and your time, knowing that you could spend that elsewhere. In addition to that, the last thing I would probably mention is there's no need to have 3, 4, 5 interviews. Oftentimes, people are taking off time from their current job or they have other things going on. So, really trying to see how we can streamline a process so that we know if you're a good fit by the end of interview number 1. And so I was really proud of that because when I first came to this specific agency, a majority of our staff would have 3 to 4 interviews for jobs that were not very high positions. So, like, I'm talking about your kind of entry level jobs or mid entry level jobs. And so we did a huge shift in that to where a majority of our experiences now only require 1 interview, and then we can go forward. In addition to that, finally looking at bias awareness and staff recognition. Oftentimes, staff would not receive a thank you. They would not receive any type of recognition in the form of, we have something called Star Awards where you can get a certificate or a thank you note or maybe like, a couple of hours of time off. So really wanted to promote recognition for staff and thank them for their time because, again, this is taking time out of their day and all of the work they're already doing. In addition to that, we did many trainings, which I had touched on slightly before, in regards to bias, so that we would not create a situation where we were calling people out, but we're calling people in. And with that, we're aware of what your blind spots are, so that if that's your blind spot, I can be open and aware of that as I'm listening to the person we interview to make sure that we're still receiving the full picture of the person that we're interviewing. Want to go over some tools and resources. These are tools and resources that I used within the process. These are also resources and tools that I have seen implemented outside of the state agency. It's very important for me to lead with that because when you work in a government space, oftentimes there are a lot of rules, regulations, and policies that are in place outside of the scope of your division or your program. And so we were not able to use all of these, but in doing my research, I would highly recommend, if you can, trying to incorporate as much of this as you can. So in looking at how we can make the recruitment process more inclusive, I think oftentimes agencies put a lot of emphasis in education and where they are recruiting their pull their applicant pool from. Uh, I think it would be phenomenal if we could really tap into non-traditional pipelines and creating opportunities for other people to walk into positions. And I say walk into, but I mean, like, obviously you have to work for it, but, just creating that opportunity for them. So reaching out to historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, community colleges, trade schools, private practices. Something that I actually learned from one of our branches was oftentimes within the private practice space, you have professionals who are near retirement but don't want to retire. And so it's an awesome opportunity for you to tap into people who have years of experience who maybe are tired of doing the administrative side in addition to everything they're doing. And you can actually cover the administrative side and have them maybe work part-time or give them contract jobs and different things to do. Lauren, your hand was raised and then it disappeared. I just want to check and see if you had a question.
Press the wrong button.
Okay, no problem. The next one is really looking at how you could implement mentorship and peer learning networks. Depending on where people are in their career journey, they may be extremely nervous coming into your environment. And so if you have a mentorship program where you have mentors who reflect or have some type of connection, commonality with the mentees, that is extremely helpful. And in the long run, will support them from a retention perspective because you're already on the front end creating an opportunity for a relationship to be established and for trust to be established. Offering tiered support depending on the manager's experience. I saw this firsthand with throughout this process. We had managers who just came out of school, had been leading for years at a time, or were somewhere in between. And so offering the level of support that was needed for that specific person, not doing a one shoe fits all approach. Keeping the interview panel small. It is so intimidating to not know anyone on a panel and to walk into an interview or to join people virtually, however it's set up, and for there to be more than 3 people on that interview panel with very high titles. So recommendation would be to keep your interview panel small. It'll eliminate a lot of fear, uncertainty, anxiety, perhaps, and create more of a thoughtful, compassionate, and intimate experience between you and the person you're interviewing. I talked about us sending the interview questions in advance. Something we also do is put them in the chat. We've had some situations where people haven't been able to locate the questions, and we also give them time. Hey, if you have notes, please look at your notes. That's why we gave them to you. That's why we gave you the questions in advance. Feel free to look at your notes, reference them. This isn't a test you're taking. We truly want to get to know you and see if you feel like you're a right fit for our organization, but if we do as well. Lean into human resources for any accommodation requests. Our scope is not human resources, so really wanting to tap into the people who know more about EEOC or anything else that we need to be mindful of to help and streamline the process. Keeping the process short and sweet. I talked about this. Really making sure that we don't have 3, 4, 5, 6 interviews, but we're keeping it very short. Even keeping interview questions down to about 6 questions, maybe 8 if you absolutely feel like you need them, but keeping them short and sweet to the point. And then asking everybody for feedback. And so these are some things that we have implemented and others that I've seen implemented in different spaces. I love this inclusive job posting language. And this is something that within our agency, unfortunately, we are not able to do because of our policies and how everything is structured. But I have seen this when you are applying for the Obama Foundation and other organizations, some nonprofit organizations. that really take in mind what statistics and data is telling us. So oftentimes, people from different marginalized communities, LGBTQ plus, people of color, and women are less likely to apply for positions if they feel as though they don't meet every single thing on that application or that job posting. And so we encourage people, hey, I do it when I am talking to people on LinkedIn and different things, but I've seen other organizations have this on their job posting and say, hey, you might not meet 100%, that's okay. Please apply anyway. When I consult with different individuals or I'm working with different teams, I encourage people to do the same thing because you never know what the applicant pool is going to look like, especially in the time that we're in now where so many people are changing their careers, going into different fields. You may be one of the top 5 if you just give it a shot and you apply. Now we're going to dive into some of the resources that I created for the purpose of our work and to share with you for this presentation. So when putting resources together, it's very important to make sure that they are in a common place where everyone can access them and they're easy to find. So we have something called an intranet page for our division, and these are the folders within our intranet page. And as you can see, circled is where all of the resources are. And again, just to let you know, IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. This is a screenshot of the scoring rubric that we created. Robin, do you think I should make it bigger? Only because I just saw you lean in.
I can't see it, but
Okay.
that's I have my own vision issues, so
Let me
that's
see.
better for me.
Okay. Let me see. I'm trying to make it just a little bit smaller. Okay, sweet. I'll try to move it from side to side a little bit. Is that a little bit better, Robin? Okay, sweet. So essentially what we have is if you look down column A, I have outlined the scoring scale, which is 1 to 5, and then our questions where we put in parentheses which panelist is going to be asking which question. And then for the question section, we have a question, and then we all have a note of what we should be looking for in a response. What I noticed when I was creating this was from a bias perspective, every person on the panel had their own idea of what they should be looking for as a response, which was creating confusion and prolonging the process of us recruiting and hiring. And so we started leaning more into the hiring manager since they know what they're looking for. And then all of the panel members use that when listening to the applicant provide their response. When it comes to the candidate and right here, oh, you can't really see my hand. You can't see my mouth. Right where it says candidate, column C in row 7, the name, we hyperlink the name and the date in all of the application materials so that if people have any questions or they are curious, they are able to click on that and see what supplemental responses were, things of that nature. Wanted to show you that at the bottom, you have about 4 panelist tabs and you have a total scores. At the bottom of this document, it calculates all of the scores from that 1 to 5, and it summarizes it on the total scores. So then we're able to see who people scored at the highest or the lowest and so forth. Now my mouse won't work. Okay. Within our email templates, we have quite a few. So we have a connector email template where essentially if I wanted to reach out to someone because I felt as though given their work experience and given where they work, they may know others who qualify or would be a good fit for the position, we send that email to them. We have a scheduling interview email template. interview panel, applicant interview outline, as well as applicant interview questions and organizational chart email template. This is a screenshot of our scheduling interview email template. So essentially, people trying to keep in mind from a trauma-informed perspective, meeting people where they are, our staff, and understanding their capacity, they would copy and paste this into an email, outline, who the email is being sent to, let them know what the position is, the time of the email, sorry, that didn't make any of the time of the email. That's not what I meant to say. Essentially, what we're doing is outlining the different dates and times where people can let us know what works for them. And then, depending on how they respond, we will let them know, hey, this is your time for the interview. In addition to that, as you can see on the bottom in bold, we have, if they're no longer interested, please let us know, because we want to be respectful of their time as well as ours. For the interview panel email template, there was no way for me to screenshot it because it was the smallest image. So I just did bullet points to do a high level overview. Essentially, we go over the bias video in the mini training, and we have a discussion on, hey, let's talk about our biases and our blind spots. How can we come together to support each other and not push each other away or call each other out? In addition to that, we have an interview outline that has the timeline and the length of time. So people similar to me who can be very anxious and antsy, thinking, okay, like how long is this for? Looking at the clock, have a very specific timeline so they know when something is going to start and when it's going to end and who's going to be doing what. They have a hyperlink to that scoring rubric that I showed you, as well as the job posting and contact information, and thanking them for their time. You also have the applicant interview email template, which outlines, again, the position, if it's an in-person or virtual interview. Transparently speaking, since COVID, all of our interviews have been virtual. We have no in-person interviews. We let them know what date it's going to take place, what the time is, and how long it's going to be for. This is where I was telling you we also include all of the panel's names. We talk about positions and where to find us. Like on LinkedIn, we'll put all of that in there. We also let them know if they are going to be on Zoom or Google. We provide the link up front, as well as a timeline again. We're going to do welcome and introductions for 5 minutes and so forth. We let them know that they're going to get an organizational chart, as well as interview questions within 24 hours or longer if it's a Friday when they get them, and that they are scheduled for whatever time. Please let us know if you have any questions. Here's one of our sample interview questions. I thought this would be helpful, knowing that I showed you the scoring rubric so that you can kind of see what it looks like in terms of what question and then what you're looking for. So what has been your experience communicating with communities you did not personally identify with, and what strategies have been successful and challenging, and how did you address them? First thing I want to call out, this interview question has 3 questions. Now, when I talk to our staff and I'm coaching our staff, I encourage them not to have anything like this on an interview question. The only reason I'm showing you this example is because we also give our interview questions 24 hours in advance. So it gives them time to literally sit and process all 3 of those questions. But from a best practice perspective, we don't always do this. We usually just have 1 question. This is just an example. Wanted to do that also because oftentimes when you have multiple questions, depending on if someone is neurodiverse or where they are in life, if you're me, you forget to answer one of those questions and you don't want it to be held against you or anything. And so best practice, my recommendation would be only do this if you know you're going to be sending your questions out in advance and they have an opportunity to answer all of them. But for the hiring panel, we know we're looking for someone who actually had experience in this area, who's self-aware of their own biases, and they have experience conducting research, different things like this. I think this is one of our epidemiology and evaluation interview questions. So going over all of that now, I am going to start wrapping up the presentation and go over impact and outcomes as well as limitations. So when looking at our impact and outcomes from the entire process, our hiring managers felt tremendously supported. They felt seen, they felt heard, and they felt valued. They really appreciated this equitable approach. The new employees that we hired shared with us that this was the best experience they ever had. They felt seen, they felt heard, they loved getting the interview questions in advance. It gave them a time to really feel supported and critically think about every single answer they could provide and provide examples. In addition to that, we also saw from a marketing perspective that word of mouth, them telling their friends and their family and other people that they know, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe how positive this experience was for me. If we have any openings, you should absolutely apply and come work here. In addition to that, some of the people that were not selected for the role, we saw in additional interviews for other positions because they really appreciated the overall process and wanted to be part of our division and our team, valuing the way we showed up with transparency and our culture and everything in between. Also, one of our primary goals, which was increasing the diversity across our workforce, was met. We were able to drastically increase our diversity, and keeping in mind what that looked like, we're going to go into limitations. So with me saying that we increased our diversity, it was hard to physically collect that data because I don't know about you all, but in applying for the positions I've applied for, it's optional for you to outline your race, your gender, and they're not up to date. So 2025, like you don't have non-binary as an option. You don't have different identities as an option. So that's where the limitation was. Now, if I were to talk to people who told me they identified a certain way, then yes, I see that we collectively grew in diversity across our organization. The other limitation is everybody and their mama and their auntie were not talking to me. So that qualitative information that I was receiving is also limited because it's only coming from those who felt comfortable sharing that information. I wanted to kind of end on the quote that we use and we live by and we reflect on when we're doing our work within our division. We refer to ourselves as headlights in our division prevention services. And we really felt and appreciated this quote from former Senator John Lewis. We must lead. We must get out there, be a headlight and not a tail light. It's your time, it's your calling. Oftentimes, people spend so much time looking in their rearview mirror instead of looking through their windshield. And so as a collective, we're trying our hardest to look through the windshield, letting our lights beam as bright as they can. Now, are there times where they might dim a little given the current things that are going on? Absolutely. But we're in this together and we're headlights. From a conclusion perspective, this and my hope in presenting this to all of you was to show you what a trauma-informed and equitable centered process can look like. Equity, looking at it from the applicant and interviewee perspective, but also from our staff, looking at everyone across the board, right? And how we can reshape a recruitment process that really promoted inclusion and fairness and overall transformation, knowing that we serve in public health and we're really trying to make sure we have a workforce that is reflective of the entire state of Colorado and we're retaining those people. You can email me at melodielowe@state.co.us. You can also find me on LinkedIn with my name, Meladie Lowe. I will open the floor for any questions right now or comments. Robin?
Hi, I was curious, as someone who works we all work in a university setting that is part of the state, and also we have classified staff members who are part of the state. I was curious, have we seen adverse impacts towards the work you're doing in the current environment that are affecting other aspects of higher ed right now?
Give me 1 second.
No, you take all the seconds you need.
Have you seen adverse impacts from the work that I'm doing
So
specifically in higher education?
So for instance, those of us who work on grants and other things have been told either overtly or in some cases, not as overtly, that we might want to consider certain things, like even things like the career merit pool. Do we consider, when we're doing hiring that is trauma informed and that we're talking about that we want to actively diversify our workforce to be more inclusive, are we getting pushbacks on that? And are there new regulations that we're dealing with that are adversely affecting the work that you're doing right now? If that
I
makes
think, please let me know if I don't answer your question, okay?
Sure.
I'm a processor and I'm a slow cooker. So the way I'm perceiving your question would be, um, I think a lot of people may have challenges, or different corporations and organizations may have challenges if they're looking at diversity just from a race perspective. For me, being neurodiverse, and really looking at accessibility in a lot of my work, I am not practicing in a way that doesn't align with the current EEOC regulations in terms of demonstrating discrimination or anything like that. I think when you practice through that lens, it can be very challenging and there can be adverse reactions. And you can have situations where people may accuse an entity of um, diversity hires. Within
Mhm.
all of our recruitment efforts and all of our hiring, we haven't been accused of any of that because people see it for what it truly is. And we're aligning research and different experiences with our work. So, for instance, when you have a diverse workforce, whether it's ability, it's age, uh, culture, language, anything, you're always going to have people in the room who can offer more
Mhm.
when you have questions, when you have problems, different things like that. And so we look at it from that perspective. And we also want to create situations where we're leveling the playing field for everyone. It's not a handout experience. You're coming, you're showing up the best that you can, receiving the questions in advance. Um, but I haven't seen any adverse um, experiences or reactions unless people are doing it in a manner that's not being mindful of everyone, not being inclusive of everyone, um, and really identifying what diversity looks like for that organization and for the people that they serve. Does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that to clarify, I think some of those let me rephrase that. I think most of those accusations are done in a bad faith manner. I just wanted to know if it had directly impacted y'all.
Mm-mm,
'Cause I mean, I
no,
would say we're completely compliant in everything we do as well, and that
yeah,
we're doing what's right here. That doesn't necessarily mean that
yeah,
people don't
yeah,
do.
yeah,
This
absolutely. And I truly have not seen that in this space. I also partner with a nonprofit. I haven't seen it there. I truly think it's all about um, how you do things, who you collaborate with, and how you're communicating different things, and the transparency piece, right? But I appreciate your question.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Melody, and thank you, Adele, for having that conversation because it made me pull up what we're talking about in higher education. When you're thinking about compliance and
Mhm.
hiring practices, two things come to mind. So if you're at CU Boulder, you probably already heard of these two, or maybe not. The APS 5065, which ties to the anti-discrimination policy, which we're still under at CU Boulder, and the other one is CADA, the Colorado Act for anti-discrimination. Look at me. So I'm just adding these two resources for folks. If you're in higher education, specifically in Colorado, these two can be very helpful because to Melody's point, if we're not excluding people, we also have to be reminded of what exclusion could look like. And when we think about anti-discrimination, our definitions in Colorado still stand. And so just wanted to thank you, Melody, for the guidance. I really appreciated how you said, I've been in many conversations where we had shared the questions before and gave people some time to process. And then some folks are just not having it. And when I think about these practices, I wonder is this an organizational change for you all where you decided every hire is going to get those questions ahead of time, or is it more of your team and we're still working through culture shift and changing that culture?
It is, before I answer your question, something else I just want to say in regards to Robin's question. One of the slides talked about non-traditional pipelines. Where you recruit is going to heavily influence who is knocking on your door and applying for your positions. So if you truly want to have a more diverse, cast your net further, it's all about where you're recruiting from, to kind of give everyone a different opportunity as well. I just thought about that, in addition to everything I shared. For what you were just saying, it's difficult for me to know if it's being implemented in every single division within our state agency. I have been told that our executive director for CDPHE has actually taken this and has been applying it for a division director position that she's currently hiring for. I think sometimes you got to plant the seed, and then nurture it, and provide water, different things to that so that people can see what it is. I think oftentimes too, some people are scared of change until they're actually in it and they can see what that experience is like. But we are seeing some people across CDPHE apply this as well.
Thank you for that, because I'm seeing the comment in the chat, and even Dr. Hansen mentioned how they're trying to make that a practice of sharing the questions before the interview.
Mhm.
The interview happens, and I think that's a phenomenal inclusive practice in getting a culture like Siebold. Well, I don't want to just say Siebold because we got other colleges represented, right? But thinking about higher education, how massive it is, working
Mhm.
for different colleges, and every college has their own practices, brings the question to how can we help people see the value, and they just need to watch your presentation. So thank you.
I also look at it through the lens of, and maybe sometimes I wonder if everyone looks at it this way. When you are doing interviews and you're meeting with applicants, they should be interviewing you the same way you're interviewing them. And so it's such a crucial opportunity for you to put your best foot forward and demonstrate your culture and who you are as an organization, and show them why you stand out differently from the other people. I haven't heard of a lot of organizations, and Allison, I appreciate you saying that you're seeing within higher education that it's more, it's starting to become more of a common practice. I haven't seen a lot of agencies and organizations sending interview questions out in advance. And I remember when we shared this with our staff, some of our staff, keeping in mind we have diverse staff in terms of age and everything, we're like, well, are we, are we creating an opportunity for them to cheat? And some of us were like, walk us through what you're thinking. What do you mean by that? Oh, well, if we give them the interview questions, then how are we going to know that, they really do have the experience? What if they're using AI? Even if they do use AI, you can ask follow-up questions. And even looking at it through the lens, as long as you're asking a follow-up question that aligns with that question, it's not asking someone what their favorite color is or something left field, you're perfectly fine. And so ask follow-up questions, but you're not creating an opportunity where you're cheating. You're creating an opportunity where they see who you are and they're assessing if they want to partner with you in your organization, because there's so many other places people can be working, and partnering with. Hmm.
Adele, I'm not, sorry, I'm jumping in because I'm seeing another comment that ties to it. Didn't know if you saw it in the chat, but it's interesting because Central Recruiting has actually switched from suggesting sending questions ahead of time to sending topics ahead of time. We found that when we sent the specific questions ahead of time, folks would try to rehearse a script they had written for themselves and get flustered if they stumbled or couldn't remember it. But if we gave them the topic areas, it would still give them space to prepare and think about what they want from that opportunity. So, just want to throw that in there.
I appreciate that. I would say do what's best for you. For our interviews, we haven't had experiences where people are flustered or stumbling over stuff, but it's all in also how you create that foundation and that framework at the beginning of the interview. And it's saying, hey, you can look at your notes and different things, but please, like, this is a conversation. Don't just look at your screen and you're reading line for line. I think some people just get so nervous when it comes to interviews, and depending on what's going on with them or the world around them, it can be difficult for people to really tap into. But from a topic perspective, I could see people also doing bullet points and outlining everything that they could speak to in regards to a topic. I'm looking over at other stuff in the chat too. Allison just put something in there in regards to sending questions in advance. Huh? 1 week in advance? I could see that because you have more time to think about, am I answering this the right way? Am I missing something? That makes sense. You have to do what's best for you. Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions? You're welcome.
If there are no other comments, maybe we'll give Meladie some of her time back. Thank you everyone for coming to this presentation today. I found it extremely helpful as somebody who sits on hiring committees. We can always do better, and this is extremely helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you need anything else from me, just let me know.
I got a
I
private
usually just stay on
question.
to the last minute to make sure nobody stayed on because they had a more sensitive question.
I got
Okay.
I got one private question about people with disability and also job placement. So
Yeah.
basically, if someone works for this organization and they are experiencing a disability that just they didn't have it before, but they finally are experiencing something that's created a disability for them, what does that look like for them to receive the support without being fired? And so the person left the story, but I just wanted to ask the question of how can we best support, thinking about Colorado, thinking about the work that folks are doing, working in higher education at will places where you could get
Mhm.
fired. Obviously not if you have a disability, but we've seen situations where people have been impacted in other ways where they didn't tie it to a disability. How can we support those folks? And then that question ties to, what if the individual was let go, but they want to apply for a job on campus and their personal file is being passed around like a resume,
Mhm.
because you can do that in an
Mhm.
internal job.
Mm-hmm. So same thing in working at the state, your hiring manager has the right to tap into other state agencies that you've worked at to look at your file. Um, and in speaking with our person who oversees accommodations, ADA, different things like that in HR, they shared with me that once an individual is aware that they have a disability, they need to have it documented immediately, and to contact HR to make sure it's documented, because if anything comes up in terms of performance or any concerns, people know that something's already documented. It's much harder from HR's perspective or anyone trying to provide support if nothing has been documented, because it's going off of um, you're not, you don't have the entire scope of information and everything. So I encourage people all the time, please go and get stuff documented. Now, if it's something within the workspace that could change, um, perhaps from my perspective, I've been able to do that for staff, and that's what I'm going to be talking about on Friday. So I've had different people, and like for me, I have a light sensitivity with being neurodiverse. So on our floor, when I did my renovation design, some of our floor is dark.
Hmm.
We have lights and stuff where you can shut them off. We have blinds, like different things like that. So there's a difference between accommodation and um, uh, accessibility. And depending on if it's something that's impacting more than one person, we can switch it over to an accessibility change for everyone, opposed to you having to provide an accommodation from a doctor or from some type of entity. But my recommendation would be, let HR know as soon as possible that you have a disability or whatever your situation is, because it can support you as you're applying for other positions, or if you do get into a situation where people are curious if you could be doing better in your position. And so that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. I'll see you Friday. I just heard Adele wanted to ask a private question, so I'm going to step away.
Oh.
I'll see you Friday.
Look at you with your sneakiness. How'd you know?
No, because I heard you say
Yeah.
I have a private question, so I want to sneak out so that you can ask your question. Bye.
All
Bye.
right, I'll leave too.
I'll stop
Bye.
recording.
Yeah.